All right. Compassion. Why is it titled that? Let's get into it, right? Welcome to Still Waters, by the way. Okay. So, if you look up the definition of compassion, Merriam Webster, definition from Oxford Language, sympathetic, pity, and concern for the suffering or misfortune of others. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so hold that thought. Let's add one to it. Man, allergy season. Do I have to edit that out? Okay, the quality. Now, kindness. The definition of this one: the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. A kind act. So, what's the difference? They sound pretty familiar, right? Well, why do I bring this up? Why is this? Why is this something that was on my heart? And if you Google the difference between compassion and kindness, they're two different words, right? Like, what's the difference here? They both refer to sympathy towards others. However, compassion is about how someone understands another's people's emotions when they are in a painful situation, whereas kindness is more about the action and the fact that we decide to help others. It's interesting, right? It's almost like the act you're transcending the action and trying to get down to the root of the person. And there's a verse I wanted to look at. Oh my goodness. I can't believe I. Well, here we go. There it is. It's Mark chapter 1, verse 41. And in the New Living Translation, moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing, and said, be healed. Now, you don't know the context clues of this verse, but essentially there's a man who has leprosy. And you know how this goes in all these healings. Jesus is just this dude who heals people, and it's awesome. You probably have the general idea of what's going on here. But what's unique here is it says moved with compassion. Some translation says he's moved with great compassion. Now, why you have to recognize, hopefully you see the power of this, but why does the Bible take the time to tell you this guy was moved with great compassion? Now, wait a second, hold on. Usually you have compassion for people if you can relate to their pain. What do I mean when I say that? When people have your same background, your same culture, your same history, your same, well, sufferings, you can relate, or as I like to say, common ground before higher ground. Uh, Especially if you're a nurse, right? And let's say you had kids and you talk and you're a nurse to someone who is having a child, it's probably easier for you to articulate and relate to what that person's going to. Whereas, unfortunately, if a guy gets in there or a girl who's also a nurse but hasn't been pregnant, unfortunately, the level of depth, unfortunately, it's not their fault. They just, you don't really understand what they're going through because you've never been through it. What is unique here is Jesus is moved by compassion. When, quite frankly, how can he relate to their pain when he's never been a leopard? I don't even have time to debunk that, but something to think about, right? Because usually, maybe it's because he's God, right? He's got that omniscient swagger about him, so he knows what's going on here, right? And he can heal leopards, so I think that's pretty crazy too. But what about us? Does that mean that we can have that compassion? Well, we're called to basically uphold this standard, live in his character, right? Learn from his example. Why do I take the time to tell you this verse? Why do I think this is an important topic? Because you can't change anything you don't care about. If you really think about it, a lot of things in your life, you either do it because you were told, or you did it because you actually cared about it. There's usually two extremes going on. Yeah, maybe let that sink in. You don't change anything or confront anything on situations you don't care about. If you don't care, it don't bother you. You ever notice when people I guess these are different emotions now, but you notice people who get frustrated at something? Well, frustration is just another dimension of compassion, right? A guy who's just losing his mind when a dude drops a pigskin called a football, and this dude loses his mind. You could say he's very competitive, but it's also like, well, it's because he cares, right? His team is losing. It's like them losing is causing him physical pain. Again, we call it competitive nature, but if you ask me, if you really boil it down, it boils down to that, in my opinion. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, like I said previously, I'm not going to repeat myself on that. But what's that thing you care about? Here's why I'm really bringing this up. Do you remember King David? Right? You ever heard that Bible verse? I know I'm throwing a lot of Bible verses at you, or references, but I feel like this is the best way to articulate because I feel like they're so culturally renowned or easy to digest, in my opinion. King David, there's all kinds of iconicness. I mean, he's all over the place. And he's known for his moment of killing a giant. Okay? Now, that's nice, but if you don't understand the context of the content, it kind of loses its awesomeness, so to speak. So, David is bringing lunch to his brother. His brother insults him publicly. He's bringing lunch because of his dad telling him to do it. So he's already watching the sheep, and he's got to do something extra on top of his already very boring day. Just another Tuesday. And so David goes down, brings the lunch, gets disrespected, etc. And then he hears from the men, hey, whoever kills this giant, coincidentally, the giant shows up when he shows up. Coincidentally. Cough. And David says, what will be given to the man? The man. So he sees himself as a man, even though he gets treated as a boy. That's a whole nother topic, right? That's a whole nother, you can spin so many stories off of that. And so now David, he asks, who will give it to man? And he says, oh, well, he'll get many riches. He'll get the king's daughter. He wasn't really interested in those things. But when the third one, your father will no longer, the father of your house will no longer pay taxes. And I was like, oh, I'll do it. So you also have to recognize more context. David has killed a lion and a bear. So I have no doubt he could have folded his brother. He chose not to. It's not just that he can fight, though that seems what he's been known for, but it's also he knows when to fight. The second thing to note is God says, notice this word, he says, I found me a man after my heart. He doesn't tell you what until later in the chapters, and here we are, this is later. And you see that he's willing to fight for a family that doesn't really care about him, but he cares about them, and he cares about, the nation of Israel, right? He's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he would come against the armies? Like, this guy is defending an army's honor when they don't even know this kid. Anyway, and I can go on and on with more stories, but here's the point. What you care about is usually a shadow of what you're supposed to be doing. Why do I say that with confidence? It says when David heard, doesn't mean the other men are deaf. It says when David heard, he got hot when he heard Goliath talking smack on his squad. He got hot. So everyone else was sore afraid, but he got hot. How you hear something determines how you react to it from that verse. But more important than that, watch how you react to what you hear. That's an indication of what you've been called to change. When something happens and it just gets you angry or some type of emotional reaction, but everyone else doesn't really affect them like it affects them, do you see that? Do you see how it's almost like a precursor of your destiny or an epic foreshadowing? So let that sink in. Now, why do I say all this? Because that's compassion. He cares about the nation of Israel. Coincidentally, he becomes the king who cares about his nation. Jesus moved with great compassion, healed the lepers. And it says Jesus moved with great compassion, fed the 5,000. Compassion is in the root of change. It's always compassion, then there's change. Now, I may not use this phrase over and over again, but it seems to be the template for change. Rolling with me so far? See how these dots are connecting? Hopefully you can relate to that. At least that helped me, because that gave me insight as to, well, look at what I'm doing right now. Why am I doing this? I get frustrated at how much we have a lot of information in this world, but very, very seldom we get truth. You get all kinds of headlines of what this happened, what that happened, but very seldom do you get the actual truth. I think there was a study that says, I'm not ashamed of the news, but they say, like, by the time the news gets the actual story, only 22 to 33% of it, a third of it was correct. But they want to tell you, hey, this just in, because they want to get those views, man. They got to stay up with it, even if staying up means you're wrong. It's unfortunate, but that's what it takes to. It's competition. There's other news stations, man. I can't hold it against them. It's a vicious beast. Dog eat dog, right? That's the world they're in, unfortunately, for now. It's another thing. Why did I do this podcast? Okay, let's look at the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We have a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of wisdom. And if you look this up, there seems to be gifts of the Spirit. There's a gift called wisdom. There's one called knowledge. And I figured that's interesting. I thought they were like the same thing. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put that into an apple pie. Discernment. We live in an age now where we have a lot of knowledge, but we don't have a lot of wisdom, discernment. In fact, I was going to use another reference. Yeah, well, I'll go for it. So remember Star Wars. There's a scene that always stuck with me. It was when they're on the Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi are on the Trade Federation ship trying to do a deal. And I believe, yes, it was Obi-Wan who said, hey, Master Yoda says that we should always be prepared for the future. And then Qui-Gon Jinn says, yes, but not at the expense of the present moment. And he's like, you have much to learn, Padawan, and much to discern. Much to learn and much to discern. Now, why do I say all this? Hopefully that gives you some clarity as to why compassion is important. I see a lot of shirts now these days that, especially in schools, it says be kind. Unfortunately, being nice without really understanding, does that make sense? That's like you're kind of putting a Band-Aid on a problem that needs a tourniquet. At least there's going to be some situations that suggest that. So, I'm going to end this before it gets any longer, but hopefully you found what I said useful, insightful. All right, that's episode 4. Compassion. A little bit everywhere, but I want you to understand that the root of everything you do truly is compassion, that you care for it. You can't change anything you don't care about. You can't confront anything, challenge anything that when you don't care for the cause. Now, I know you're thinking like, well, what if it's just a feeling and blah, blah, blah. Well, unfortunately, we are social creatures and our emotions are huge de factos of our way of life. Look at all our stuff we got. Look at all the cell phones and technology. Like, why didn't mankind just stop at living in a box, living in the cave with fire? Like, there's always someone along the way who wants to go above and beyond. Really, maybe it's compassion for themselves or others. I'm tired of horses. I want a car. Tired of cars. I want want an aeroplane. I'm tired of airplanes. I guess you can call that the human spirit and the will for progress. But reality, it's some form of compassion. Do I have a master's thesis paper on that? No. But it's almost like, why do you do anything? And I always point it back to that scripture. Moved with compassion, Jesus healed the leopards. They could have told us any other adjective that justify his actions. They chose that one. Moved by compassion. So, what moves you? Do you care about it? If not, that might be your answer to the question. Do you care about it? And why? All right. Well, I'll talk to you next time. Episode 4, Compassion. Deuces.